Hi everyone, I'm Janet Lohr, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up a space to work on clay at home. Many people think you have to have a potter's wheel to make things out of clay, but that's just not true. There's an infinity of beautiful hand-built projects that you can make. While we're conducting the class remotely, you'll be coming to school at specific intervals. I'll let you know when. You'll be picking up some materials. You'll be delivering projects that you've made in order for them to be fired. But most of the time we'll be meeting online and you will be working at home. So here's what you need to get started. So you're going to have to identify a spot where you're going to work. It can be a tabletop, it can be a desk, it can be the floor, but you're going to have to protect it because clay is messy. Get an old sheet or papers or a small tarp and put those things out before you work. And any clay that drops on them, you're going to want to shake out and take it outside and shake it out after you're done, so that you're not grinding clay into the floor. You're going to need 3 lidded buckets for water. Label them 1, 2, 3. That's how you're going to rinse your hands. Why? Because clay clogs drains. We want to keep it all out of the drain and in the buckets. So as you rinse, by the time you get to number 3, your hands will be clean enough that you can go to the sink. So a tiny bit of clay in your hands is okay, but you don't want very much clay going down your drain. If your space is limited, just use smaller containers that you can stack. And when you have scraps of clay, toss those into container number 1. We're going to save all that clay, and I'll be showing you how to recycle it so we can reuse it later. We don't want to waste any clay. You're also going to want to have a way to store your projects while you're working on them. A big plastic box with a lid is a good place to put your greenware. So greenware is clay project that has not been fired yet. It's like green, like fruit that isn't ripe yet. And you want to protect your greenware because it's very, very fragile. If you put it inside of a box where cats and roommates and dogs can't get to it, it has a much better chance of surviving. So be sure that everybody in your household understands that, tempting as these things are, they should not be touched by anybody but you. Before you start, you'll always need to prepare your clay. And the process we'll use is called wedging. Wedging is a process of getting out all the lumps and air bubbles that might cause a problem in firing. Now I'm going to show you how it's done. Now I'll show it to you fast first so you get an idea of what it really looks like when you understand how to do it. And then we're going to break it down into steps. Because if you do it correctly, it's going to really prepare your clay well. And it also is a chance to kind of meditate on what you're going to be making. So wedging is a really nice way to start your day when you are getting ready to make things out of clay. Okay, we saw it really fast. Now let's dissect that action. If you are standing at a table, you're going to have 1 foot in front of you and 1 foot behind. That's so you will be able to lean forward and use the weight of your back to do the work. You won't be just using your arms. You want to be able to lean your weight into the clay. If you're working on the floor, you'll be kneeling, and again, you'll be leaning down into the clay. Your hands are side by side on top of the clay. Your thumbs are side by side, and you can see that my fingers are actually crossing over each other a little bit. Now I'm going to lean down into the clay, and I'm only leaning far enough that there's a dent from my hands in the clay. And here you can see that dent. I didn't try to make the clay completely flat. That's important. You'll see why in a second. Now I'm going to roll the clay back towards me. And if you can think of a clock face so that you're facing 12 o'clock, you're going to roll the clay upward and give it a turn to 3 o'clock. So let's watch that again. 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Now we're going to place our hands exactly as they were before. Your thumbs are side by side. Your fingers are slightly crossing each other. And now you lean down onto the clay. You're going to roll the clay back towards you. Now, when you lean down onto the clay, if you're doing it right, your fingers are actually a little bit underneath the clay. Don't worry, it's not going to hurt. Just let the clay come down on top of your fingers, because then you can pull the clay back up from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock very easily. It just kind of rotates and rolls right back up. But you notice I didn't punch my fingers into the clay. It's just a very slight dent. Now, once you get the clay back up to 3 o'clock, you lean down again. And then you repeat the motion again. You're going to do that over and over and over about 1,000 times. No, just kidding. Not 1,000. But probably about 30 times and maybe a little bit more. Now, how do you know that you've wedged enough? You're going to pound the clay into a ball. Then you're going to slice it. Slice it 3-4 times. Carefully pull it apart and look. Do you see any air bubbles? Do you see any lumps? If you see little tiny grainy marks, that's okay. That is the grog that's in the clay. Grog is a sandy material. It's actually clay that's been fired and ground up, and that's there to give your clay better drying qualities so that it doesn't warp, and you don't have to worry about that little sandy stuff at all. What you're looking for is real holes. That's an air bubble. And in firing, that air bubble can expand very suddenly and cause a piece to pop out. So we don't want any air bubbles. All right, so now we have our clay cut apart, but how do we put it back together so that it isn't going to make some new air bubbles? Well, if you took it apart carefully, you can put it back exactly the way you took it apart. And then you're going to slap it down a few times and make sure it's all joined. Wedge it 2 or 3 times just to make sure everything is back together. And now you're ready to go. You're ready to make pots. So you've wedged your clay, you've checked for lumps and air bubbles, everything's nice and smooth, you've pounded it back into a ball. If you're not ready to make something out of it right now, put it into a plastic bag. We want to always keep our clay nice and moist and soft. And then you're good to go. We're going to make stuff.